Hello, everyone. My name is Hiba Saleh. It's a pleasure for me to be here to moderate this public lecture organized by the Center for Alternative Policy Solutions on the very important issue of water scarcity in Egypt and the wider region of the Middle East and North Africa. Our speaker today, Dr. Mark Smith, is the Director General of the International Water Management Institute, which is based in Colombo in Sri Lanka and has offices across Africa and Asia. Dr. Smith will discuss the convergence of three important and interlinked issues: water security, food security, and climate security in Egypt and the wider region. Of course, Egypt is already defined as falling below the water poverty line in terms of per capita share of water. Egypt also has a growing population and it faces potential disruptions to its water supply because of climate change and also because neighbors who share the basin of the Nile River have increasing demands for water and hydropower. I think everyone is aware of the immense concern in Egypt about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the fact that there's still no agreement with Addis Ababa. Dr. Smith has been Director General of the International Water Management Institute since August 2020. Before that, he was Deputy Director General for Research for Development at the same institute. He has 25 years of experience of research and program management in water resources, agriculture, climate, and sustainability. He has worked for the International Union for Conservation of Nature and has been a governor at the World Water Council. He's also led programs in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. One last word about the Center for Alternative Policy Solutions. It's a public policy research project based here at AUC. APS works through both research and a process of consultation with stakeholders to come up with inclusive public policy solutions to some of Egypt's most difficult challenges. So I now hand you over to Dr. Smith.
Great. Thank you so very much for that kind introduction. I would like to begin by saying what an honor it is to have received this invitation and to be able to make this presentation to you. And I hope that we'll have an interesting time together exploring, as you said, what are really critical issues for this country and this region and, frankly, for the whole world. I want to begin also by just giving some additional and specific thank you to the American University in Cairo and the Alternative Policy Solutions Program for staging this event, and particularly Dr. Rabab Al-Mahdi, who leads the Alternative Policy Solutions Research Project, and Dr. Soha Abdelati, who's Deputy Director of the Alternative Policy Solutions Programs. Thank you so much for including me in tonight's program. As you said, the International Water Management Institute, we're an institute that works across Asia and Africa. We're based in Colombo. We have an office here in Egypt that works on water management in Egypt and in the region. And so it's a real privilege to be able, therefore, to engage with you all and have a discussion with you all about these critical issues. I am on the way back now to Colombo from Glasgow, where I attended the Climate Change Conference of the Parties for the last 2 weeks. And so, in a way, I'm privileged to convey some of the, not the messages from the COP, but the sense of what went on there. And it's, you know, it's important to perhaps understand that the COP is a combination of events. On the one hand, it's a very serious and very political negotiation that takes place at the center of it all. But around that is a zoo of probably 20,000 people who are trying to, or more, who are trying to advance the sharing of knowledge about climate change and advance what people identify as solutions about how we can go forward and tackle the climate crisis. And water is one of those areas that attracts people's attention about how do we solve the water issues? What are the solutions that we can bring to the table for adapting to the impacts of climate change on water? So the text, the agreement that we've all read about in the newspaper this last weekend, it doesn't mention water. It talks about adaptation, which is not new. It talks about the urgency of adaptation. It talks about the urgency of scaling up action on adaptation, on finance for adaptation, capacity building and technology transfer, and so on. It establishes a particular program to build a work program to build towards a global goal for adaptation. That's called the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program. And of course, that is a recognition also that if the COP is coming here to Egypt next year. And so our hope and expectation from the water networks around the world is that at the COP next year, hosted by Egypt, where water issues and water vulnerabilities are so strong, that the water agenda for climate change that I'm going to describe today will be given prominence in the process at COP next year. So the agreement that came out of Glasgow, it does not say water explicitly, as I said. And that doesn't necessarily matter because we know that for adaptation we need to act on water, and I'm going to explain why that's the case. But one of the key things to remember is that climate change is water change, right? Sorry, it's hard to juggle all your hands here. Climate change is water change. And if there's one thing that you take away from the event tonight, it's that. Climate change means water change, and that's true here in Egypt, and it's true the world over. We need to advance the slide, please. Did I just manage to turn it off? Oh. Can you advance it? Okay. All right. So just a quick outline of what I'm going to work my way through. So the first is this point about climate change is water change. I'll then relate that to water security issues in MENA and Egypt. What is it? What are the response strategies? What are the responses that are being prepared and carried out here in Egypt and in the region? And then how do we move forward? How do we catalyze change? How do we use research and innovation as a means of catalyzing further change? And then I'll make some final comments about how we need to be thinking about bold action, urgent action and bold action, and really transforming systems. So, I don't know what's going on with the slides, but if you can put those back up. Okay. Okay, the bottom one. Okay. Okay, so just to give a little more clarity about why I say water change, climate change is water change. The basics of the global climate system is about radiation received by the Earth. That's then it becomes heat, or it becomes evaporation. And then circulation in the oceans and the atmosphere, and that combination of radiation, heat, water, the oceans, the atmosphere, that's the climate. It's the very basics of the climate. So as more energy is added to that system, the water cycle is intensifying. so there's more energy in the system, and then there's therefore more extreme events. The IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just published its most recent report just last August. And this is the compilation of views of the world's climate scientists, not the evidence from the world's climate scientists about the current state of climate change and its impacts. And this report from August, it was very sobering, and we can say it was alarming. It makes very clear that climate change is underway, and that the projections for climate change represent serious danger for human societies. And if you read the report that was published in August, from the point of view of a water scientist, like I am, and that my colleagues are in our institute, it reads like a manifesto for urgent and bold action on water management. What you see on the screen is two graphs that explain why that's the case. So these maps, these stylized maps of the world, so each of those hexagons represents a particular region of the world. These maps represent the top, those areas of the world in which we've observed increases in heavy precipitation, so extreme events, and in the bottom map, those areas of the world in which we've observed, as in it's already happening, we've observed increases in the severity and frequency of drought. And unsurprisingly, the Mediterranean and West Asia is one of those regions where that is happening. These graphics are from the same report. So these are about projections. The last graphic was about what we're observing now. These are about projections. So based on the models that scientists use, the top set of maps relates to expected changes in precipitation, so how much rainfall we get at the current, at 1.5 degrees of global warming, and then 2 degrees, and then 4 degrees. And you see the darker brown colors, that means it's getting drier, and the darker blue colors means it's getting wetter. And of course, in this region, we expect things to be getting drier, and that's reflected too in the bottom graph, which relates to how much soil moisture there is, so how dry the soil is. And we see as the climate changes, that in this part of the world, there's projected to be less water in the soil, and that of course has all kinds of implications. The key point of this graphic is to say, so this is for different types of impact along the bottom, food, natural environment, water, etc. And what would be some anticipated effects as the temperature gets higher and higher? And the basic message is that every increment of warming means more severe impacts, means more dangerous impacts. So therefore, whatever we can do to limit warming will benefit us. So the key point that I want to make here, and that was reflected in the title of the lecture too, is that based on the observed and projected climate change is a profound challenge to water security, and therefore to food security and climate security. What do we mean by water and food security? We mean we have enough of each of the required quality to meet our needs and with acceptable levels of risk. Okay, that's a sort of a sense of what we mean by water and food security. But I want to add to that this idea of climate security. So climate change creates a lot of uncertainty about the future, about the availability of resources that you need for water and food security, and we call it a risk multiplier. And it's a risk multiplier also for food and water security. climate change is reducing, climate security is about reducing exposure to vulnerabilities and to risks. So as we build climate security, we reduce exposure to those risks. And those risks, they go beyond simply food and water security, of course, and these are big worries in the world. So risks that relate to diverse impacts that cause inequity, fuel competition, lead to grievance, and with knock-on effects for risks related to how people are adapting, so risks, for example, related to migration in response to climate impacts, and indeed the risk of escalation of conflict. So we build security for food, climate, and water by building resilience to those risks, and we do that through a systems approach, and that's what I'm going to explore as we go forward. But a second critical message then is climate change is water change, but water, food, and climate security are codependent. They depend on each other. So when there's a weakness in one, there's a weakness in all of them. So therefore, as water security is weakening because of climate change, it threatens all three of these securities, and vice versa. So I want to therefore move on to discussing this region, and there are some critical questions that we need to bear in mind for Egypt and for the MENA region. What are the projected effects of climate change in this region? What are the vulnerabilities related to food security, to water security? What are the risks to food security? What response measures are in place? And what innovations and strategies are needed now to go forward and to respond to the situation as it's emerging? So what are the implications of climate change as I've framed it for MENA and Egypt? A key issue here is to understand that in regard to the impacts of climate change on water scarcity and on water security, I think it's fair to say that the Middle East and North Africa, if we remember those maps, it's really ground zero for those impacts. This is where they are being felt most strongly and are going to be felt most strongly. And that is in terms of, as you see on the graphic, heat, drought, but also floods. So one of the manifestations of climate change is extreme events with floods, droughts interspersed with floods. So this is a quick summary of some of the climate change projections that we see for this region and for MENA. And again, what we see here, starting from the left-hand side, is rising temperatures, so more heat. We see changes in precipitation and in the hydrology of the region. And then the map of the Nile basin that you see on the right-hand side represents a monitoring system for drought. So as we go forward, these are the kinds of systems that we need to be using to be able to manage the impacts as best we can. So if those are the changes that are happening and that are coming, what is the state of water security? What are the pressures on water security in this region? And really, I think no surprises here either. And I think you mentioned this in the introduction as well. Egypt is faced with severe water scarcity, with renewable water resources well below that poverty line of 1,000 cubic meters per person, and declining further as we go forward. There is acute water stress in the region, the bottommost map on the left. Groundwater abstraction typically exceeds annual recharge, the top rightmost map, and wastewater pollution is a pervasive problem in the region as well. So, one of the features of this region, it's not alone in this, but one of the features of this region is that so much of the water that is used in agriculture. So region-wide, it's 86% of water use is used in agriculture, and in Egypt also is a high proportion of the water is used for agriculture. So what are the implications of that given the changes in climate that are occurring. So the dominance of agricultural water use, of course, means that agriculture is exposed to water risks from climate change. And therefore, the threats to water security from climate change are also a threat to food security. And as the climate changes, water security threats in Egypt are growing, and they're putting food security at risks. And these then in turn generate risks for climate security. So how might those be experienced? How will this play out? Well, we can imagine, and this has happened in various places in the world, of course. We can imagine internal changes because of those converging risks related to food prices, related to livelihoods, related to health and well-being, related to internal migration, and the kind of discontent that that can foster. There are international issues, which you also touched upon in the introduction. So transboundary water management and cooperation is very important in the Nile. And the threats to water security, they make that harder. And the lack of cooperation also increases exposure, therefore, to risk. And the GERD, the Ethiopian dam, is an example of that, actually. So climate variability is increasing uncertainty about water resources and water flows in the Nile, combined with infrastructure development, but without transboundary cooperation, that leads to political tensions, and that's, of course, what we see in the world, in the region today. So what this tells us is that this issue of that water security, food security, and climate security are converging here in Egypt. So this tightening of these risks to security is underway here in Egypt. So what do we need to do? Well, a place to start in considering what we need to do is to just some basics about good water management. So good water management starts with good water governance. So how do we organize people and institutions and laws and regulations to manage water well? So we need to get that as right as we can. Make sure that that addresses inclusion and equality of access for marginalized groups, equality of access for women, and so on. And then we need to work on balancing supply and demand. And we have a whole variety of options and tools and technologies for doing that. So you see on the graphic down the left-hand side different ways that you can manage supply, for example, storage, wastewater recycling, desalination, the way that we manage groundwater and aquifers, etc. And then down the right-hand side, different ways that we can manage water demand. So different policies and costs that you can apply to water to help and give people incentives to use less. Work that we can do on reducing leakage, reducing evaporation, using improved irrigation technologies to improve the efficiency with which water is used in farmers' fields, etc. So that's the big picture of what are the tools and approaches that we can use for this challenge of managing water. So let's now consider Egypt's situation. So there's a very interesting basic set of numbers here about Egypt's water accounts. So how much water does Egypt have, and how much water does Egypt have? How does that relate to how much water Egypt needs? And then where does that water come from and go to? So the estimation is that Egypt requires, this is the blue, what do we call that? The blue cylinder on the left-hand side. Egypt requires 114 billion cubic meters of water a year for self-sufficiency across agriculture, across industry, across household consumption, across uses in Egyptian society. So 114 billion cubic meters. But it only has 60 billion cubic meters available, meaning that there's a supply deficit of 54 billion cubic meters. So how does Egypt respond to that? Well, right now the way it responds is through water recycling. So the gray part of the cylinder, recycling of agricultural drainage, recycling of wastewater, and putting that to use to help meet that supply deficit. The other way Egypt responds is through trying to enhance productivity, so getting more out of the water that is used, but also imports. So Egypt is one of the largest importers in the world for water-intensive crops, and that's a way of saving demand or reducing demand on water here in Egypt. So those are Egypt's water accounts. So I've tried to paint a picture of the external drivers on water resources because of the climate and the way those are changing. So what is Egypt doing about the water stresses here? And at the center of that is this National Water Resources Strategy, a 20-year strategy, which has those 4 pillars that you see on the left-hand side, and it has a whole range of actions that are underway. So investment going on in wastewater treatment, the lining of canals to prevent losses of water, modernization of irrigation, development of a greenhouse industry because that has water productivity advantages, for example, and the use of desalination. So there's a core strategy here that Egypt has as we go to build upon. In addition, and this is part of the process that in relation to the Paris Agreement on climate change, countries prepare their nationally determined contributions, including their priorities for adaptation. And so this is a quick summary of some of the key water-related components of Egypt's nationally determined contribution. In this case, a section of that document that talks about intended actions to promote resilience, intended actions in relation to water resources. And you can see the kinds of actions that are listed there. And these are a part of a strategic framing, and they are a part of the aspiration. So Egypt is recognizing the kinds of things that are going to have to be part of water management going forward and water investments going forwards. So just to summarize then where we've got to so far, climate change is water change. Climate change is increasing the severity and frequency of extremes. Egypt and the MENA region are ground zero for climate change impacts on water scarcity and water security, which in turn risks destabilizing because of that coupling, food and water security. And water management is key to responding. And Egypt has portfolios of actions on water resources and related actions on climate change adaptation. So that's the foundation. That's where we are today. So how do we now catalyze the changes that are needed going forward? And as we'll get to at the end, how do we introduce some sense of urgency into that? And what contribution can research and innovation make to catalyzing those changes? So I wanted to just start in introducing the research and innovation needs with this framework that relates to resilience. You remember I said that the means by which we build securities, food and water security, or reduce the vulnerabilities to food and water insecurities and climate insecurities, we do that by building resilience, using a systems approach and building resilience. So this is a simple framework that lays out what are the key components of climate resilient water management. And you notice it's a nested framework. So at the innermost part of the framework is about infrastructure and technology. And the outermost part of the framework is about governance, participation of people in water management, and also related self-organizing networks. And I put this framework up like this, because people usually start, the place we start, and you saw that in the strategies actually, the place people usually start is with the technologies. What are the technologies we can deploy? But we have to be careful to do that within the kind of water governance that we need for resilience. And I'll come back to that in just 1 second. So the intervening two parts of the framework are first data and information, and the skills and capacities to use that information, so to help people then take action to reduce their risks. And the third component is system diversity. So alternative sources of water is the easiest way of thinking about that. So not being reliant on just one source of water. Okay, I just want to, before I move on to some of the other elements, I want to talk about the governance component. As I say, all of these other things, they need to happen within effective water governance that enables people to manage the risks that they face, right? Empowers people to manage the risks that they face. So we talk about that as multi-level water governance. So you've got the highest level, national and in some cases regional policies and institutions and so on, but those are set up to then empower people locally to take action and respond to shocks and stresses as they are occurring. So that's a key building block for resilience and strategies as we go forward. So an example then of the kind of innovations that we can bring to bear on this challenge in the second part of that framework in terms of data and information. This is the technology of water accounting, which brings together satellite observation, water modeling, hydrological and meteorological data, and so on, so that you can make an account for water in a basin or in an irrigation scheme or points in between. So an account for water is how much water do you have and where's it going, how's it being used, which is very useful information if you're then trying to manage water. And indeed, as we go forward under climate change, to be able to monitor how water resources are changing because of climate change. So it's a very important and useful tool, and at the international, at our institute, the International Water Management Institute, this is a tool that we've been developing alongside other partners for some years, and we use quite extensively or intensively also in this region and in Egypt. But water accounting is not so much about getting information into farmers' hands, so that they can be well informed about water risks and how to manage their water most effectively and efficiently. So this is an example of a phone-based app that does that. So farmers, and this was developed here in our IMI office in Egypt. So based upon a set of inputs, it provides key information into farmers' hands via their phones to help them know when to irrigate with how much water, so that they can use less and make sure that it's applied in the most effective way possible. So remember, the third component was about system diversity, and this is where we can think about wastewater treatment. Wastewater reuse of treated wastewater introduces diversity into the system, so helps us build resilience and helps us strengthen those securities. So we run a project called Rewater MENA, which is working in Egypt and across a range of countries in the region, and it's moving toward, through a series of steps, having for each of those countries, including Egypt, a 2030 strategy for water reuse that would be launched next year. So a really important, in this region, a really important contributor to building resilience around water. And the final part of the framework that I showed you is to do with technology and infrastructure. There are many examples of that, and my earlier slide on water management pointed towards a few of those. But I just wanted to highlight a particular project that we're helping to run in the region and including here in Egypt, which is called the MENA Regional Innovation Hub for Water Energy for Food. So it's how do you manage that system of water, energy, and food in the most effective ways possible. And how do you support innovation? So the program is running an innovation incubator. The 3 examples that you see on the screen are particular innovations that we are working to support here in Egypt, relating to advancing agricultural technologies for energy efficiency, for water efficiency, for food security, and thereby contributing to resilience. Just a quick final comment before I get onto my conclusions about my institute. My institute, the International Water Management Institute, is part of a larger network of organizations called the CGIAR. We don't need to get too deeply into who we are, who that organization is. But the CGIAR is currently going through a big reform, which means that centers like mine are more or less merging together. The relevance of that is what we're working on is a whole set of new investments, in research and innovation to help support the kinds of needs that Egypt has. Two of those are of particular relevance to the issues that I've been speaking about today. One is a regional initiative that will bring together research and innovation on agrobiodiversity alongside increasing water productivity and managing water risks and digitalization in agriculture and in water management. And the second is called Nexus Gains. This is working in a range of river basins worldwide, one of which will be the Nile, which is looking at developing quite sophisticated models to help governments better manage and allocate water amongst different sectors, and thereby improve water productivity and improve agricultural water productivity. And so take the strain off of the parts of the system that we've been talking about tonight. Okay, so just some final wrap-up comments then. So what therefore, given this situation, some of which is quite stark, and as I said before, alarming or sobering, what does the future hold? Well, the future is uncertain. It's always uncertain, but it's getting more uncertain. But we are witnessing warnings that there are major risks ahead for water in Egypt, in MENA, and indeed globally. And certainly in Egypt, these risks are to water security, to food security, and climate security, and those risks are converging. Water management provides us, however, with really critical tools for managing those codependencies amongst those securities. And as a consequence, water management really has to sit at the heart of policies and strategies for food security and climate security, for how we work on adaptation, for how we ensure food security of countries like Egypt. A critical priority then, and I know this is a challenge in Egypt, but it's not a challenge that Egypt bears alone, that's for sure. A critical priority is therefore to integrate policies for food security into agriculture and food policies and into climate change policies and across other sectors, and vice versa, right? We need to bring these policy frameworks into convergence. Egypt has much to build on. We saw the National Water Resources Strategy and the aspirations of the nationally determined contributions, but we need to build further resilience, and that's going to be vital as we go forwards. And this demands, as I showed you in the framework that I presented, it demands integrating water governance, data and information tools, diversity in the water system, and infrastructure and technologies. So there's an opportunity in front of us. There's an opportunity in front of Egypt to manage the sets of risks that are on the horizon by really shifting the paradigm for water and the water landscape in Egypt. And there's perhaps we can end with 3 things to think about how we do that. The first is on governance. So adopting a more bottom-up approach to planning and implementation, this idea of empowering local institutions, but making sure that bottom-up approach is embedded in a common, coherent national development vision that integrates water, food, and climate security. And bringing together policy actors across domains, across the different sectors, so that we can align and make sure that we're taking the action needed across sectors. Second is there's major opportunities for digital transformation in agriculture and in water management that could really change the game and change the game quickly if we get it right now. And third is transformative investment in water infrastructure and technologies, whether that's to do with wastewater treatment, whether that's to do with desalination plants, that will augment the water resources that are available. Things like we looked at lining of irrigation channels. And I'll pose a question related to that, a challenge related to that. There's a lot of talk around the climate change arena about nature-based solutions. So how do you make use of the services that ecosystems give to us in managing all of these risks and problems? So can Egypt integrate nature-based solutions and ecosystem services into its transformative investments for infrastructure? Something to think about. Some of this is underway now. Climate change does, though, need to focus our minds, and we need to change mindsets as we do so. Water scarcity and climate change are systemic. They require a systemic response, and we have to be urgent and bold as we go forward, including by using policies and strategies and investments in water management that will shape together the future of water security, food security, and climate security. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions now. And let me ask the first question, which is, can you tell us what climate change is going to do to the Nile? I mean, the river we depend on so much. And what's the time frame we're looking at?
I can give you a general answer to that. And one is that as we look into the future under climate change, something happens that's very different. We have to do something that's very different than we've done before. In the past, like throughout human history, when we've looked at water management, we've depended on what we know about what's gone before. We've depended on our understanding and our measurement of hydrology from decades past. And climate change means we can't do that anymore. So we need to rethink the way that we need to rethink just the basic starting point of how we plan and invest. And that's going to be true for the Nile too. And one of the things that we need to look for as we do that is which options will be robust, which options will work, which options for infrastructure and technology will work across a wide range of possible climate futures. So the climate future for the Nile is not clear. So therefore, we need to be looking at what are the options that we can take that are going to work across a wide range of futures. And we take it from there.
Thank you. So let's take questions. There should be some microphones. Gentleman in second row. Are there microphones? Yeah, microphones.
Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you very much indeed for a wonderful presentation. I have a background. I was a senior Assistant Secretary General to the United Nations World Food Conference in 1974. And I loved when you said water security, it may move into water insecurity, will move into food insecurity. Because in that World Food Conference, we were the ones who really talked a lot about food security. And Henry Kissinger was attending the meeting with us, and he said, let us hope by 1985, no child will go to bed hungry, etc., etc. But they went to bed hungry and so on, because, you know, usually after conferences, not something happen. One thing we learned in that conference and we publicized is that, I loved that you talked a lot about food security, is that food cannot wait. 3 words, food cannot wait. In those days, in the 70s, there was a problem of oil. Oil can wait, but food cannot wait. So I can understand why you are emphasizing this, and no one will disagree with that. Secondly, in Egypt, in addition to everything you said, with which I'm in total agreement. There are sometimes simple things which are ostensibly simple, but they are not simple. For example, underground water in Egypt. Until this minute I'm speaking about, if people don't know that if I own this land, the water under it doesn't belong to me. So they keep drawing the water, but they shouldn't draw it. There should be a meter for drawing the water, and already people overdraw the water, and there is salt inclusion in the water already happening. And this has been going on for decades, regrettably. And this is a very important thing, because there are areas in Egypt where there is good underground water, which oftentimes is used to produce, green for the land. If you drive to Alexandria, you will see that. So this is another important point. Thirdly, I wrote an article over 20 years ago about these places where they play golf, golf courses. It became a fashion in Egypt. And there were 24 golf courses then. I think now there are 40. I estimated that 24 golf courses will bring the water of 84 million people household,
Sir, can I interrupt you here? Yeah. Because we have a few minutes for questions
fine.
only.
I'll finish in maximum 2 minutes. Oh. So if I were, a ruler, even under privatizing, can say, thou shalt not. We don't need golf courses to bring 6,000 tourists. They can stay at home. We have enough for tourists, So, and golf courses there are 40 golf courses. So these are things, in addition to what you said, have to be taken care of, and they can make a big difference. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you. So next question. Yes, in first row.
Syed Abdel Hafiz from SWRI, Soil, Water and Environment Research Institute, Agriculture Research Center, Ministry of Agriculture. I would like, first of all, to thank Dr. Mark Smith for his fruitful and nice presentation. I have some comments, a few comments, and some few questions inside these comments here. Actually, in Egypt, we do survey, ranking, and recognize water challenges and water solutions. In addition, looking forward to extend far beyond water scarcity. And so far, we usually ask ourselves the following questions. Are water resources being managed sustainable and efficiently? Are water-related risks being appropriately recognized and mitigated? Are water services being delivered reliably and affordably? Why you ask this question? In order to find out and recognize the opportunities and the solutions for water security. Actually, I have here two questions, and I received already the answer from your presentations. But let me ask these questions. How can water security contribute to Egypt's economic, social, and environmental well-being and its path to peace and stability? Second question, how can the unmanaged trade-off in water, energy, food nexus contribute to an over-exploiting our water resources? Finally, the stakes are high. Egypt will need to redouble its efforts to manage its age-old water challenges. In this era of acute scarcity, we appreciate and looking forward that EMI could work with partnership with our government, civil society, private sector, as well as regional institutions and international institutions to enhance Egypt's water security. Here, I would like to thank very much Dr. Mark Smith, the DG of EMI, our dear friend Dr. Amgad El Mahdi, for his contribution in this field of interests, and that is being appreciated from our all. Thank you very much.
We'll take a couple more questions and then Dr. Mark will have to go. So can we make them short questions, please? The lady there.
هتكلم عربي. مروة حامد، صيدلانية بالإدارة المركزية للمعامل. اوكي. مروة حامد، صيدلانية بالإدارة المركزية للمعامل في قسم المياه بكتيريولوجي، مسؤولة عن تحاليل المياه في مصر عامة. امبارح كنت في مؤتمر تبع المعامل، في مؤتمر خاص، وكان الكلمة بتاعتي بتتكلم عن تحديات المياه وتأثيرها على البابليك هيلث، وركزت أكتر على النقطة بتاعت محطة المعالجات المياه الصرف الصحي. من ضمن المعالجة اللي هو الكود المصري، ان احنا بنكشف عن الاشريشيا كولاي وكده. فده ايه تأثيره لو احنا هنتجه، الدولة تتجه اتجاه محطة المعالجة المياه، ايه تأثير ده هيكون على الصحة العامة؟ هيكون كافي ان احنا نكشف اشريشيا كولاي ونيماتودا، ولا احنا نزود الفوكس على اكتر مايكرو اورجانيزم عشان ده كتأثير مقدما in future يعني؟ بس ده سؤالي.
I'll just try and answer that very, very quickly. I showed this 3 circles of food, water, food, and climate security. I think you could add a sort of line running through that, which is about health, right? So one of the critical things, or the key things that makes water so interesting for people like me, is that water connects everything. And the types of things that I've been talking about tonight, they also connect to human health. So what you've just outlined has to be part of the picture too. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for your nice lecture we heard. I go straight forward to the subject. During our discussion with DAD, DAAD, Deutsche Akademische Austausch, this is we are expecting that the water of the Mediterranean Sea will increase by 25% and hit the delta in Egypt. And our discussion with the Ministry of Environment, they already have support from United Nations, I think 7.5 million, to put stones all over the north of Egypt, starting from Port Said up to Saloum. Thank you.
Lady in front, in the red.
بشكر حضرتك جدا على المحاضرة القيمة دي. أنا بس عندي تعليق بسيط، إن لازم تفكير الشخصية المصرية يتغير. إحنا طول ما إحنا عندنا مية في الحنفية ما فيش عندي مشكلة، بفضل أشتغل بنفس الريت بتاعي والاستهلاك، مش شايف إن أنا عندي مشكلة ما دام أنا عندي موجود مية. فلازم الدولة تشتغل على ده، يعني لازم نغير التفكير بتاعنا. يعني مش هينفع اغسل العربيه بكميه الميه دي، مش هينفع امسح السلم ونظف الشقه بنفس الطريقه دي. متشكره قوي.
I'm Professor Nader Nuruddin, Professor of Soil and Water Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Cairo University. Thank you for your good presentation, but I have some notes about when you talk about North Africa and Egypt, like Egypt, Libya, Algeria, you talk about more frequent for drought in this area. But this area is already hyper-arid area. There is no drought. We live in drought, in permanent drought. When we talk about drought to Egypt, you should talk about inside Egypt and outside Egypt from the upper Nile, because how is climate change will affect, will impact the water resource in Ethiopia, the rain feed. We don't have in Egypt or in Libya, in Tunisia, in Morocco, any rain feed agriculture. Thus, there is no drought because we already in drought in all North Africa country. Number two, when you talk about the water balance in Egypt, you talk about 114. This is what our need for water. But if we suppose right now we are 100 million capita for our population, and each one needs, everyone needs 1,000 to be above water scarcity level. That means our water requirement is only a 100 billion cubic meter, not 114. And this is which come most of them from the Nile River. As I agree with you, our total resource is about 62, not 60, because we have about 1 billion cubic meter from rainfeed above the delta. This is another thing. When you talk also about the water, food, and climate change, the nexus is already becomes that. It's a water, food, energy nexus, and become water, food, energy, and climate change nexus. And very soon it will be also, we will add population growth. And this is a nexus already we know, and thus I ask you to, when also you talk about the crop health, you means crop quality. Not crop health also. Even now we talk about the soil health and soil production instead of soil production, but there is no health for crops but quality. This is all what I want to see, but I want to thank you so much about this very good presentation. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of reactions. First is your point about the food conference makes me also want to remind people that in 2023, which I didn't mention, in 2023 there'll be a UN Intergovernmental Conference on Water. First one in 47 years. First full intergovernmental conference on water in 47 years. So it has the potential to indeed be we'll see what happens, but to be an inflection point in the way that this agenda is approached in the international agenda. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see. And of course, it will actually fall in between the COP in Sharm el Sheikh and the COP in the UAE. So it could be quite a significant event for all that we've been talking about tonight. Fully agree with you in how we frame drought. It makes a lot of sense what you said, and indeed the relevance of water, energy, food. And to be honest, when I presented, I didn't want to get into that because it just gets so complicated when you try and talk about it. But the key point is, in the water, energy, food nexus, you have to negotiate trade-offs. You have to make trade-offs. You have to make choices. And you asked about what for Egypt. Therefore, what's the for Egypt? Therefore, how do you look forward to a good future, a harmonious future, and so on. And in respect of the water, energy, food nexus, surely the critical thing, therefore, is how to manage those trade-offs in the best way possible is at the heart of it. And that comes down to water governance as well. Comes down to the means to negotiate those trade-offs, whether that's locally or whether that's around the highest tables of government, right? They have to negotiate those trade-offs. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Are there more questions? Dr. Ayman Al-Mahdi from the International Water Management Institute has kindly offered to respond to questions. تفضل.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. اوكي ده بيشتغل. حاضر، اتفضل حضرتك.
نتكلم عربي بقى ولا انجليزي؟
اللي حضرتك تؤمر بيه عربي او انجلش اتس اوكي.
لا عشان احنا المجموع كله قاعد
I think there is people speak English here, so.
Thank you very much. I would like to first congratulate Dr. Mark, in fact, for becoming the head of the AMI and for this very interesting and informative presentation. I believe it was a very good presentation. This water security, water scarcity is a global concern, and Egypt is not an exception for this yet. But maybe I have to add the challenges that Dr. Mark mentioned about the different challenges, but one of the challenges that also could aggravate the problem is the COVID-19 with increasing water demand and so on. This is one of the area that, another area that about the climate change, the uncertainties. We know all that the expectation or projection depends on regional models. So this has a very uncertainty of the results of this. So still there is uncertainty. That's why I am agree with what Dr. Mark mentioned about we have to plan rather than expect depends on the model results as very uncertainties. We know that who pays the bills for the climate change impacts the vulnerable communities and the poor. This is very bad news. However, there is an opportunities mainly in water management. AMI has a very good experience in water accounting, water productivity. This is one of the areas that is very promising. Meanwhile, also the nexus, as Dr. Nader mentioned, the nexus between food, energy, and water, and climate and environment. But we have to add the trade-offs, as the Mark mentioned. So one of the areas that raised is about the awareness. I'm very agree with the lady, which she mentioned about the awareness as a national security. We have to move from the scarcity, from there's a lot of water to the scarce position of the water. One of the things that may be also raised here by my colleagues here about groundwater. Yes, groundwater still, but the good news that there is now the law, the irrigation law now, the new one now, is approved by the parliament, and this in the law, there is a control for the groundwater abstraction, and this is a governance issue.
Okay.
The last thing, that the Gulf areas. Yes, maybe there are some, but most of them, they are using the treated wastewater. It's not fresh water using for the Gulf. Yes, but that's what I mean. No.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Is there, do you want to
Can you have
respond?
any comments from?
Thanks, Dr. Hussein. I can give some reflection on that, and I think it's I like the way you put it. Like when we talk about the threat, there is always opportunities, and even when we have seen with COVID-19, so we did some study when we look at the COVID-19 impact on the agriculture sector, and what we found, yes, we understand it has more impact on the whole agriculture trade in the world, and that we start to see that reflecting in the food price around the whole world. But in the meantime, we have found also it creates some opportunities for smallholder farmers. So they've been able to secure more income. And that was, again, coming with, like, especially here in Egypt, for example, about the cultural perceptions about, like, if you use garlic, you will improve your immunities. So the farmer that actually were producing garlic at that time, they actually generate more income. So threat, not all the time you have see it as a risk, but also you can see how you can bring opportunities from that risk as well.
Thank you. Lady there.
Thank you very much for this talk and for organizing it. My name is Aida Yahya. I am an assistant lecturer at the British University in Egypt. I wanted to ask two questions. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam has been ongoing for almost a decade now. I was wondering if any of the two contending parties, whether Egypt or Ethiopia, has approached the Institute to negotiate or to mediate in this conflict. That's number one. The second question is with regard to the solutions that you've suggested. One of them is with regard to digital technology and this application that IRWI that was presented. I don't know whether it's functioning or not yet functioning. That's the question. And the second part of the question is, how is that going to be feasible with a nation that is to a great extent still suffering from illiteracy? How can they use this application if they are illiterate? Is it going to be via using signs, or is it going to be script, or what? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Let me take them one by one. I think in your first question, when you talk about is any of the governments actually approaching us? So we are as a knowledge partner. So our institute as a research for development, international public institute. So what we do is actually we provide the information that can equip the decision maker to make a decision or even to use it in the negotiations. So we provide information in public, and all our informations are publicly released, but we don't push any government on any side to use our information. We just make it available, and it's really up to the negotiator to use such type of information. Coming back to your second question about the IRWI application. So IRWI application being developed in partnership with SWERI, the Soil and Water and Environment Institute under the Agricultural Research Center here in Egypt. And the application, it's active and it's available. It can be used at any platform, like an Apple phone or Google, or even on a web use as well, like on your laptop or tablet. It's actually used by farmers at the moment. So when we did the development, we work with the farmers and we listen to them about how we can design that, and also get a lot of inputs from our local partners in terms of how that application can be designed. And one of the lessons learned is really the farmer, they don't really see how much water they need to use or apply, but they only need to read that information as a number of minutes or hours of irrigation. And that's the way they comprehend that information. So for us, working with SWERI, we're able to transform that information, like crop water requirements or irrigation water requirements, to represent it to the farmer in terms of 40 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours of irrigation based on the type of crops they have, or the type of soil, the type of irrigation system, and the level of growth of the crop. And that was easy to be acceptable by the farmers. We went to the farmer also, we trained the farmer as one-to-one and also in a group. And we currently rely on a word of mouth from farmer to farmer. So we're not doing any campaign about the application. By the time we finish the project, I think we have around 150 farmers using the application. But currently it's over 1,500 farmers. And that show, it's a farmer talk to each farmer and inform them about that application. And I'm happy also to announce that we have a program now to continue work with SWERI and also to continue develop that application further for the next 5 years, as we have secured fund for that work as well. And that again responds to your third part of the question, which is the level of literacy of the farmers. I think one of the lessons learned as well, what we found, because we did also some assessment for the whole MENA region, not just Egypt, about the level of acceptance and the level of infrastructure and the capacity in each country to actually accept the digitizing solutions. And what we found in general, across the MENA region, around 80% from the farmers are above 50 in age. However, around 95% they have access to the smartphone. 72% they have subscription to internet, so they really are familiar to access information through internet. And also 60% looking for weather information. So they're looking for is it going to rain, the temperature. So it's a matter of how we can actually communicate the right information in the right format to them, in the way they comprehend. We did the same exercise for IRWI in Lebanon. And again, in Lebanon, it's a different environment, different local context. And the farmer there are familiar with cubic meter per hectare. So we put that information in that aspect to them. So they were able to access that information and use it. And in Lebanon, we do it in Bekaa Valley. So we have around 6,000 farmers actually using the application there. And again, it's a word by word. And also one lesson we have found here as well by listening to the farmers is actually they rely also on the new generation. So the new generation actually start to take, not everywhere, but in many places, like their children, their kids. And through some work, actually, we developed like a comic book, a small comic book that actually explain the application to the kids, so the kids can actually inform their parents. And that was actually well taken by the kids as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? I can't see, it's dark. In front here, yeah.
شكرا على الدعوة اللي جت لنا. وأنا اسمي طارق صبري، جهاز تنظيم مياه الشرب والصرف الصحي، متخصص في مجال المياه ومراجعة المياه. احنا طبعا هنا لما اتكلمنا هنا على الووتر سيكيورتي والفوتر سيكيورتي والكلايمت سيكيورتي، تمام؟ طب احنا في مصر هنا بنشتغل في الووتر سيكيورتي، نعرفها ان احنا شغالين في مأمونية وسلامة المياه الشرب وتداول الامن للصرف الصحي. ولكن بالنسبة للووتر سيكيورتي والكلايمت سيكيورتي، هل هم لهم معايير محددة ان انا اقدر احكم عليهم وبالتالي اقدر اطلع قيم رقمية اقدر احسبها؟ طب واذا كانت هناك اطر تحدد اللي هو الفود سيكيورتي او الكلايمت سيكيورتي، زي ما هو بالمثل ان الدبليو اتش او محدده للووتر سيكيورتي، معناها ايه بالظبط؟ فاذا كان لهم معايير، كيف يتم الربط بين معايير الكلايمت سيكيورتي والفود سيكيورتي وبين معايير اللي هي الووتر سيكيورتي؟ اعتقد ان هذا الموضوع قد يحتاج الى دليل لكيفيه الربط ده في حال وجود معايير للكلايمت سيكيورتي او الفود سيكيورتي. شكرا.
Shukran. Thank you for your question. I will quickly put it in English. So the question was about how you establish that standard as we have it for water quality to be able to look at water security and food security and climate security. So there is a number of different indicators that already you can use to assess the water security or food security at the country level or at the basin level or even at irrigation district or scheme level. The same for climate security. There is a number of indicators that Mark was showing, like in terms of like precipitation level, the ET or the evapotranspiration from the land or from the crop. Is it actual? The level of soil moisture as well, you can look at it. So there is a different number of indicators. You can use that. I think what you are asking is really how we can link those indicators with the water quality indicators as well. And there is always a question. You remind me when I was leading the water resource sector in Australia, when we start or established the Australian water reform system. And by reforming the whole water sector in Australia, we start talking about quantity. And we managed to do a lot in quantity. And after 7 years, it was a 10 years program. After 7 years, we start to realize where is the quality. We haven't done anything on the quality yet. And that is always missing, even in the developed country, not just the developing countries. And it's always hard to be able to work on parallel on the quantity and quality. And always people talk about quantity first. Even like, as Mark was mentioned, one of his slides, or even in the last comment he made, when he talked about the water allocations. And we don't see, for example, environmental water flow that applied in many countries, applied here in the region, because as we are living in the most scarce water region, so we allocate water first for the human being, and then for the fisheries and so on. But for an ecosystem or environment, that's really coming down the grade. And that question between quality and quantity. However, if we start to really have the holistic thinking, what's happening in the ecosystem, so if we provide the right quality, we are going to get the quantity. Because again, the quality manage the level of using of the water. And we try to promote like fit for purpose. So whatever quantity available, and when we look at water availability in any system, it's better if we attach the quality hat for that quantity. So that water can be directed or allocated in the right place for the right purpose, for the right use.
Okay, we'll take one more question and then we can finish at the buffet.
Thank you for your cooperation with us about solutions for water. I would like, I have application at the North Coast. As I would like to comment on the lady here, she said, we waste the water as long as we find it in the tap. Nowadays in the North Coast, there is a shortage in water. When we received the village in 2000, we have water till about 2015. The price of the cubic meter raised from 1.5 pound to 15. So we don't have water now because the village doesn't pay the bills. So accordingly, the company cut the water. What we did, every villa or chalet, or they make his own money, his own water by digging a well and putting pumps. I personally put a pump on the well and it works automatic by solar system. So whenever I need water, the solar system gives the electricity to the motor and deliver water to the sprinklers. So I irrigate the garden. So this is solution, and now is widespread in all over the village because we don't have water. So every person mandatory to put a pump to find his own water. I remember in the past when we have shortage in water, I go to the company and I speak with the manager. We need water in the village. Why you cut the water? He said, yeah, the president is in his rest in Burj Al Arab, and we need to direct the water to the President Rest House. So, and also this station, water station in El Hammam, was delivering water up to Marsa Matruh. Nowadays, the army solved this problem by putting a solar station in Marsa Matruh, working by solar system, and it works on desalination and supply water to this area. So I think if everyone deliver his own water, he will be keen on the water and he will never waste it. Thank you.
Thank you. A quick reflection. I think it's 2 points. One is really, if you remember the slide that Mark was talking about when he presented the principle for water management and talk about the supply side and the demand side. So in the supply side, yes, you do the supply augmentation, but in the demand side, where it comes to the change of behavior, as you've been asking, and a changing of behavior playing really a critical role and one of the key successful factor for any management decisions for water. Because even if you put a lot of regulations on water and we don't really lift the people knowledge and awareness about the situation of the water resources and how they can change their behavior, that can actually make any decision failed and not, or any policy failed without succeeding their target. So people behavior or a changing people behavior or a change management, it's really become part of the equation of the water management. We do currently a project in Jordan where we're looking at the water saving technologies. And what we found just by making the farmer accept to install water meter, a normal analog water meter on their farm, that after 2 seasons, the farmers start actually to change their behavior without upgrading their farm to like a drip irrigation system or to high efficiency system, because they have realized by watching that meter how much water they apply, and also by putting that meter just on the plot that upgrade, they start to see, oh, I can actually put less and still get the same quantity or the same yield I want. So they start actually to apply this to the rest of their farm without investing in irrigation technologies. So that again comes as behavior change. The second comment I want to make is actually when you talk about the solar. So the renewable energy or the solar energy for pumping or for irrigation, it always needs to come also with some regulations around it. Because as it's provide a mechanism to give access to the water, it can also create some harm to the groundwater system, because it can deplete the groundwater system quite fast. So it always needs to come with regulations around it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Ayman, for stepping in. I'm sorry. Sorry. And there are refreshments at the buffet there.